Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu. I'm a partner at Shearman Sterling and co-head of the Technology, Media, and Telecom Industry Group. Today, I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Jane Reeves, who's Senior Vice President of Enterprise Compliance at Thomson Reuters. Jane, welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm very pleased to be here, Richard.
Wonderful. So, Jane, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what you do over at Thomson Reuters?
Okay. Well, I've been with Thomson Reuters for some time in their legal department. And during that time, I've taken all sorts of different roles as a regional counsel, as a divisional general counsel. I've worked in government affairs. But more recently, I've been working in the compliance area. I work on both sanctions and export control and also in privacy and general information governance.
Got it. Well, I'm particularly interested in, this is a privacy podcast. I wanted to ask you about what you see in terms of your major issues in terms of privacy and security. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. As you know, Thomson Reuters is at its heart is an information solutions company. And so how we manage and protect information, both the information that we use in our content, the information that our clients give us to process as part of our services, the information we gather about our clients, about our employees, it is absolutely the heart of what we do, that we manage and protect that information properly. And we are a big company. We have perhaps close to 50,000 employees. We operate in 90 countries, so very many jurisdictions to deal with, a wide range of products. And keeping a handle on all of that data as it flows globally around our company and meeting the expectations of both our regulators and our clients and our employees, it's managing those two pieces together are really my biggest challenges.
Well, how do you do that? I mean, obviously the regulations are changing constantly. We just have the new GDPR that's going to be in place in 2018. I mean, how do you manage such a process?
I think that, and we will come on to the GDPR in a minute because it's a project of its own, I think is the best way to describe it.
Very good.
I think the way in which we manage it is by ensuring that we have a really strong partnership with the other functions within the company. So I think it is absolutely key, if you're heading up privacy, that you are not trying to manage privacy within your privacy function. We are, by privacy standards, a medium-sized team. I think there are eight of us altogether, but that's 8 of us trying to spread across all of those jurisdictions, all of those employees and products and services. And so the key for us is working very closely, particularly with our technology and product development colleagues across, with the sort of people who can be champions for privacy across the legal departments, across marketing, and with our HR teams. And that is how we manage it. The 8 of us could never do it. It has to be this very close collaboration with the rest of your corporate world. And in order to get that close collaboration, I think a very big part of it is the requirement to communicate and advocate for privacy in a way that makes sense for all of our corporate colleagues, that this is the right thing for us to do as a corporation, and in particular that this is the right thing for us to do for our clients, because we are looking into the corporation and they are always looking out to the clients, and it's making that connection between them that really matters.
Do you feel like you have to really play that advocacy role in a strong way, or or not?
No, I don't think I have to play. I think I am unusually fortunate in working for the kind of company that inherently cares about this stuff, because we are working in a very professional marketplace, because our clients care about this stuff as well, then actually it's not difficult for us at all. This is largely a business-to-business environment, and some of our clients are regulated themselves. And privacy has, particularly over the last year or so, the profile of privacy has just kept on climbing. And we we are in a company that wants to do where people want to do the right thing anyway, and they want to do the right thing by their clients. And somehow privacy has come right into the nexus of that.
Let's talk about the GDPR. You're mentioning that.
Yeah.
What's your view about that, and how that's gonna change things?
How is that going to change things? I think the GDPR. First of all, I'm glad it's just finally there after so much anticipation, and really actually so much time making me look like an idiot, because every year I would say, yeah, this is the year that the GDPR is going to pass. Yeah, this is the one. And everybody, the first few years, everybody would nod at me and go, yeah, you're right, Jane, you're right. And by the third or fourth year, they're going, yeah, right, sure. So I'm just delighted it's finally gone through. And also that has cleared up. At least there's some level of uncertainty about what it's going to say. And at least some of it has crystallized. I think there's a huge amount to go in terms of what it really means, what advice, what guidance, what implementing national law will be put in place. But at least we've got something to start on now. And it was extremely difficult to kick off any kind of project until it got there. But to get back to your question, what do I think is going to change? I think two things have really changed. The principles, the basic principles, haven't actually changed at all. You can recognize all of those from the Privacy Directive. What has really changed, I think, is that now compliance must be demonstrable. And that word keeps on coming up throughout the text. Either straightforward, you must demonstrate this, the controller should demonstrate that, or even by inference that you should be able to demonstrate it. So in privacy by design, the inference is there that it's not enough just to have privacy by design. Maybe you've done everything in meetings and you've only ever talked about it. You have to be able to show that it's there. And I think that changes a lot. I think it puts privacy into almost a quasi-regulated environment. It becomes closer to financial regulation or pharmaceutical regulation. And it's something that people who've worked for a long time in those arenas would really recognize, but I think is quite new to a lot of privacy specialists, and particularly to the business, to think about privacy in this way. So it's that demonstrable component that's really different to me. And the other piece is just the level of the fines. I mean, they are, if I ever see anybody's eyes even slightly glaze over as I begin to talk about it, I just mentioned 4% of annual global turnover, and you have their attention completely. It gives a level of power and perhaps authority to the national regulators that they have never had before. I think the national DPAs can now wield a big stick, and that was the intention, and I think it's there. It will be very interesting to see how they wield it and against whom, but nobody wants to be the first in that particular line.
What are your thoughts about the privacy by design now being part of the GDPR? Do you think that's a good thing, or do you think that will be burdensome? What are your thoughts about that?
I think privacy by design has always been best practice. So there's nothing new in that. And I think that's another part of the theme of the GDPR, is that it has taken what was previously best practice and made it law. So I think it's something that people were always striving to do. And I think it was right, therefore, to put it in, because it was part of the sort of community of best practice. But I do think, I think what is difficult about privacy by design is that what has been written about it is so scanty. There is so little to help you work out what it really means. Does it mean making sure that you implement privacy impact assessments as you go along, which is something that one would always have done anyway? Or does it really go deeper than that? And are we actually looking at standards that need to kind of be driven down into the way in which we even code our products and services? So right down at that level. And if we are looking at technical standards, hardcore technical standards, like, for example, used for information security, then we need to have those written and agreed, so people can begin to understand, and we can have that conversation with our technology colleagues in a language that really makes sense to them, as opposed to some sort of broad based principles, which are not very helpful when you're looking at a line of code.
What is your feeling about the safe harbor, the demise of the safe harbor, and now this privacy shield also sort of in flux? Is that going to wreak havoc on companies trying to do cross-border transfers and knowing what to do? What is your view about that?
Well, I mean, my view is necessarily kind of quite limited as a global company. And of course, the Privacy Shield or Privacy Shield, I should say, and Safe Harbor only solved one part of the puzzle. They only ever solved EU to US. And if you're working in a global environment, particularly as you begin to think about deploying cloud and really providing resilience and redundancy and failovers, actually just a EU to US is not enough, and it never has been for us. And so we have always had to find alternatives to a safe harbor privacy shield type of arrangement. So we have always relied on data transfer agreements. And that, like many globals, was our response to the demise of safe harbor, was to implement just a much wider set of data transfer agreements.
And for data transfer, you would just be using, I assume, the model clauses?
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Let's talk about a little bit about your view about the intersection and maybe the philosophical level between privacy and security. Do you feel like there is those two groups really do talk to each other enough where there's much integration, or do you feel like the privacy folks are sort of get disjointed from security? I'm curious to know kind of what your kind of view about that, and again, maybe even at a philosophical level.
I mean, the two, there is an absolute intersection, and there's just a clear legal intersection between the two, in that the requirement to maintain technical and adequate technical and operational measures to keep the data safe, the requirement for breach notification, bring security and privacy into an intersection together. So I think it is clear that the two are absolutely enmeshed. We work very closely with our information security colleagues. In fact, one of my key information security colleagues sits in a desk behind me so close that I could touch him every day. I don't, because I think it's inappropriate, but we could. And I think you probably do need your information security colleagues in touching distance, both either physically or metaphorically, preferably physically, because that's helpful too. You begin to overhear conversations. There's a sort of a more relaxed sort of conversation and chat around issues, and that I think is very helpful because we are moving within the same world.
Do you feel like many privacy colleagues don't know enough about security and vice versa? What is your view about, do you think?
I agree. I don't think we do know enough about information security. And I think there is a gap there. There should be, we can talk about it in sort of hand waving big terms. But when you really get down to it, I never feel that I really know enough technically about how it works. And I think there is a big gap actually for a sort of a serious, solid information security for privacy specialists course that would really take you down into some of the technical details so that you can talk about patches and firewalls with real confidence because there is actually some technical depth there.
What about the other way around? Do you think the security folks they understand the privacy issues, or you think that there's also a little bit of knowledge over there that could be imparted?
I think they do understand the privacy issues. I think they are perhaps it's difficult for them. What is difficult for them is to know how significant they are in any particular information security incident or in an information security scenario. So I think it's about being able to, whilst you can understand the principles, is actually understanding the context and the risk levels, I think is harder for them. And that probably comes less through training and just more through a lot of interaction between the two teams,
Mm-hmm.
so that you begin to get a flavor of it, a feel for it. And that's why we talk. We have calls at different levels. We have monthly calls, we have weekly calls, we have work streams we work on together. And we absolutely need all of that to keep the two in line together.
What, in your view, is sort of the, two or three sort of thorniest privacy issues that you sort of deal with or see? I mean, obviously, there's so many different things. I was just at IAPP. I mean, I felt like my knowledge was like a thimble in an ocean. But what what do you sort of see as the sort of the 2-3 really thorniest issues?
I think there is a very thorny issue around transfers and localization. The failure of Safe Harbor, I think, brought into very stark relief the difficulties around transfers and how do you legitimize transfers. And layered on top of that is this sort of trend. It's almost too much in its infancy, or hopefully it won't grow much further, towards localization. And where it has appeared in countries like Russia, it is extremely difficult for a global company to deal with. And because we have to work at scale, and we can only work at scale if we can build our systems and our data and our services and our support on a global basis. And so clearly, if you have to keep all of your data in one particular country, and even if you can replicate it, it still makes it sort of undermines that ability to build at scale. So I worry about localization, and I worry that it may be a creeping trend, that it's been kind of talked about perhaps in China, in Brazil, possibly even in France. And I think it plays against, it goes so significantly against the making data a global asset, and actually leveraging what is great about data and what could be so helpful in so many scenarios. And I do think that I think is a particularly sticky problem for us, and generally actually for business. I think the other area for us, which I find very difficult, and perhaps is a moderated criticism of the GDPR, is I wonder whether at a philosophical level we have built a regulatory environment which is too big. So we have put too much within scope, and we might have been better off building something with a smaller garden with higher walls, and really focused down hard on protecting the information that individuals care about most, as opposed to broadening it out to everything. And that sort of, and I hesitate to use the word risk, because it shouldn't really be about risk. It should be about what individuals care about the most, not about risk. And maybe that's why the GDPR didn't take in the end really much of a risk-based approach. But I do think that perhaps we would have, the privacy would be both easier to implement and easier for individuals to understand and to appreciate if it really honed down on those areas that mattered most.
Do you think just following on the GDPR point, do you think that, I mean, Thomson Reuters is a huge company, so, you've got resources, you can do these things. Do you see this as going to be difficult for, a small company, a startup? But, I mean, that's the thing about the GDPR, we have financial controls like in Sarbanes-Oxley, but of course those are only public companies. So, but I mean, GDPR makes no distinction. So presumably even a small company has to, well, what are your thoughts about that?
I think it's incredibly difficult for a small company to comply. I mean, to some extent, hopefully there would be less data, less complexity, perhaps less geographical spread in a small company. So compliance should be easier. But when you get down to this demonstrable piece, I think that's extremely difficult for a small company to do, because that's not how they are building their business. They are building their business by being agile and fast and responding very quickly to what clients want. And if they're at the same time sort of backfilling with sort of a lot of compliance paperwork and an audit trail to show how they have complied, I think that's very hard for them, particularly if there isn't a real skill base or an experience within that company to do it.
Yeah. See, now you seem like you're very, you have a very good understanding of privacy. Obviously, you've been doing this for a while. What do you like about the area from, either from a legal perspective or a personal perspective? What do you like about the subject?
That's a really good question. A number of things. I like that I enjoy the complexity. I know complexity is not helpful. And so this is only at and it's not helpful for Thomson Reuters, and it's not helpful for the world, and it's not helpful for the individuals whose data we're trying to protect. So only at an intellectual level, I kind of enjoy that complexity, whilst realizing that it's a guilty pleasure. And I enjoy the way in which the law absolutely reflects sort of global politics and geopolitics, and that makes it very interesting. I also think that people who work in privacy are just nice people. I know that sounds like an odd thing to say, but they are. They have been working in an area perhaps that has been under-resourced and maybe sort of under-observed for a long time. And there's a real kind of band of brothers, a community feeling within privacy, and a willingness to share. Absolutely a willingness to share your issues, share your approaches that perhaps you don't find in other arenas. And that is a great place to work.
Well, Jane, that is a perfect place to say that I'm so appreciative of you taking this time and willing to share your thoughts. And I know you're super busy. It's been a fascinating conversation. I really do appreciate your taking the time to speak with me.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. And thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
This is Richard Hsu and Jane Reeves. Thank you.